Propeller Club of Northern California.
Yeah, yeah.
Yay!
Yes.
Welcome, everybody. We are here today to hear from PMSA's Mike Jacob, who is going to give us a presentation on the situation with Howard Terminal. And Mike has been the point man for the PMSA and for all of us that are concerned about this. And I want to say that this has been a real cooperative effort on the part of many, many people in the maritime community who have gotten together around this issue. And I want to particularly thank Mike at PMSA and also the help that we've gotten from the harbor truckers. Andy and Scott, you've done a really great job of representing the harbor truckers as during Morrow. John McLaurin, of course, from PMSA has been a forward and a leader here. Susan Ransom, is Susan here yet? I see Susan Sullivan. Is Susan Ransom? Yes. I see a wave there. Susan Ransom has been absolutely out front on this, and Susan, you really deserve a lot of credit. Evie, thank you very much also for your contributions. I have to tell you a funny story, which Mike is aware of. As you know, I also write for the American Journal of Transportation, and I reported on a BCDC meeting 2 weeks ago in which there was comment from Mr. Garcia and Ms. Ransom, which I quoted. As a result of this, Mercator sent a letter of complaint to my editor citing the fact that I had quoted Susan Ransom and Mr. Garcia, two individuals who he said were outspoken opponents of this honest project to help develop the port. And so, you know, Andy, my mother told me that I should always hang out with good people, and now you guys have gotten me into the soup here, and you know. But in any case, we will trudge on. So, without further ado, I'm going to start introducing everybody, so everybody gets a chance to introduce yourselves. Again, I want to thank all of you who are working in the port, in the harbor, and supporting getting our imports and exports to where they need to go, and all of the good work that you have been doing. Thank you again for your service. And I'm going to start with my wingman here, Todd Crawshaw. Todd?
Like me to introduce myself?
Yeah, introduce you. Who are you?
Our company is Crawshaw Design. We provide integrated brand marketing for print and the web, and IT work support for you and your company. And you know, I might mention, I think you were too, Stas, that about at the bottom of the Zoom screen, if you're not familiar with it, if you click on participants, it brings up a side bar that shows who's participating. You can, during the talk, you can also hit next to the chat bar, which brings up you can raise your hand if you have a question you want to ask afterwards, or you can type in a message that'll show up. So just to be aware of that.
So as soon as we have the presentation, Mike will go on after we do the introductions. And if you have a question, if you raise your hand, one of us will try and see you and get the question asked. I'll have you unmuted. In any case, Mr. Garcia, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning. My name is Andy Garcia. I'm chairman of the board and executive vice president of GSC Logistics. We're one of the logistics providers at the Port of Oakland. We've been operating at the Port of Oakland for the last 18 years. And I'm proud to say we handle about 12% of all the import volume coming into the port. So there's a great deal of vested interest in the success of the port for all our customers, and also a great deal of opposition to this Howard Terminal, this playground in the middle of an assembly line that has been proposed by a whole host of minds that do not consider the port a gateway, but rather a profit center. So I'm delighted to be part of this group today, and you can count on GSE to do whatever is necessary to push our costs forward.
Very good. Andy, thank you very much. Ellis?
Oh, hi, I'm Ellis Wallenberg. I'm with Weiss Associates. We're environmental engineers, and we've done a lot of work at the Howard Terminal, and we've done a lot of work for the Port of Oakland, as well as we're currently also working for some of the tenants there doing environmental work. So I'm Director of Environmental Services for Weiss Associates.
Thank you very much. Kim Arrive.
Yes, good morning. I'm retired Pacific Maritime Association at the coast in San Francisco, and I was responsible for training up and down the coast in all 23 ports, and now I'm retired.
Okay, very good. And you have a small ship that you work on at the Port of Richmond.
Yeah, the Red Oak Victory. It's a World War II ship that helped us win the war.
Thank you, Kim. Susan Ransom.
Hello, Susan Ransom, Client Relations Manager for SSA Terminal, largest stevedore terminal in the Port of Oakland, currently at about 70% of the business.
Thank you, Susan. And from Copenhagen, we have my good friend, Bo Brystrup. Good morning, Bo, or good afternoon.
Hello, Stas. I'm Bo Brystrup. I'm a partner and director in a small, you can say, broking and financial boutique in Copenhagen. We have worked with you for many, many years on various projects, and we are located in the center of Copenhagen in the premises of the Danish Shipowners Association's building with a lot of like-minded people. We are just opposite the Global Maritime Forum, which is, a well-known institution that is working for getting to zero in terms of decarbonization of shipping. So we follow this very closely, and we have been working with projects ourselves and will succeed in the problem of plastic in the ocean. So we are working on a concept of floating waste processing units that can mitigate this problem by the source and not by catching it in the ocean. And through this, we're working very much with how hydrogen, converting syngas into hydrogen. And there are some Danish companies and American companies who are very, experienced in this. So this is something we are looking forward to continue work on. Yes.
Oh, one quick question. How is the situation regarding the COVID virus in Copenhagen?
The virus, well, Denmark has coped quite well, frankly, in the sense that we put up restrictions very, very early. So unlike my family in New York, that has been a disaster. Copenhagen is coping quite well. We don't see one single cruise ship in the Port of Copenhagen. We used to have 3 or 4 at a time. We don't see any tourists. The Little Mermaid is very lonely. Have no tourists to say hello to. But the benefit of all this is that our rate of infection is in international comparison quite low, and much lower than Sweden, who did pursue a different tactics. So Sweden have 10 times more deaths than Denmark has. We have about 500 deaths. Sweden have about 5,000 by this strategy of instructing herd immunity, which apparently has been a very costly strategy. So I would say we are optimistic, but we all afraid of the second wave, of course.
Very good. Bo,
The
thank
hospital,
you,
I can
Bo.
say the hospitals don't see any incidents anymore. The doctors say we don't see the coronavirus in Copenhagen at the hospitals. That's what I can say.
Very good. Bo, thank you very much for your report. Andrew Wong.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Huang. I am the marketing manager for the Port of Oakland. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Taylor.
Yeah, Scott Taylor, GSC Logistics. I agree with everything my esteemed partner, Andy Garcia, said. I will cede my time. Otherwise, if we all give 2-minute speeches, we won't be able to hear Mike Jacobs' words of wisdom and jewels of knowledge. So it's great to be here. Thanks for putting this on, Stas.
Thank you very much, Scott. Alan Michiano. Alan?
I busted. My mouth is full of food.
Oh.
Alan Miziano with General Steamship, local agent, handles Schnitzer right next door.
Thank you very much, Alan. Alice, our board member, welcome. Alice?
Thank you. It's great seeing you. I'm Alice Herron. I'm on the board, as he said, and I work for Golden State Renewable Energy. We're looking at energy storage and renewable opportunities at the port.
Thank you very much, and good to see you. I see a person named Benita Margaronis. Come on, say hello. All right, she's coming over. Come on quick, because we have a lot. This is Benita. Say hello, Benita.
Hi.
Hello, Benita.
Hi.
Bye. Okay. Mr. Chen. Can you hear me? I'm going to unmute you, Darren. You there? Okay. Let's go. I'm going down the list here. Andy, Andrew, Prevost.
Oh, Delphine.
Delphine.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, we can't see you. Where are you?
I know. Sorry, I'm having to multitask. How are you, everybody?
We're good. Thank you, Delphine. Introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, I have the esteemed privilege of being the Port of Oakland Maritime Division's Manager of Administration and Finance. But I'm also the acting Maritime Director right now until our new director comes on board at the end of June.
Oh, we have a new director coming on at the end of June.
Yes, and I'm not allowed to make an announcement about who or anything yet, but it is. But he is coming at the end of June.
Well, I know where Mike Zampa lives, so I'll work on that project later.
All right. Well, at least I won't be the one to have spilled the beans.
Okay, Delphine, thank you very much. Welcome to the Propeller Club.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have Evie Wong. Evie, good morning. You're still muted. There you are.
I double clicked. There we go. Hi, I'm Evie Huang. I'm a customs broker with Alba Wheels Up, San Francisco division, and I'm currently president of the Customs Brokers Forwarders Association in Northern California, and we are users of the port. And thank you, Stas, for putting on this webinar. We look forward to updates from Mike Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Evie. Kamyab Mashian.
Hi, yeah, that's me. My name's Kamyab Mashian. I'm from I'm with Dewey Square Group. Anthony Kusic or Logan Duon would usually have been here in my place, but I'm just here since I couldn't make it, just to listen in. We're helping with communications and public affairs.
On the ballpark. for the good guys, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Thank you very much for your participation.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Catherine Pan.
Hi, this is Catherine Pan. I'm a waterfront planner at BCDC. I'm working on the Seaport Plan update. So just here to listen and learn.
Very good. Catherine, thank you very much for participating. Kevin Jones.
Hi, Stas. Kevin Jones, Port of Oakland. I report into Andrew, and so joining to just receive the latest updates on the project status.
Very good. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kimberly Cartagena.
Hi there, Kimberly Cartagena. I work for Centerline Logistics, formerly known as Harley Marine Services. We are tugs and barges and full maritime company. And down in the Bay Area, I'm in Seattle, but down in the Bay Area, we're right across from Howard Terminal.
And you're a board member of the Propeller Club of Northern California.
I am a mobile board member.
You are a very mobile board member. Kimberly, thank you very much. Laura Covery.
Hi, Stas. Thank you so much for inviting me. Laura Covery. I am past president of Propeller.
Hi, how are you? I'm fine. I'm on a conference call.
Okay, hold on.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, past president and longtime former board member of the Propeller Club of Southern California, former mariner. I now am a consultant with Environmental Maritime Services, and I teach business classes at Cal State Long Beach and UCLA Extension.
Very good. Laura, as always, thank you very much for participating. And you're also a CMA graduate and a former professor at CMA, right?
That's correct. Yes, I am.
Thank you, Laura. I see LT Cotton.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Janae Cotton. I'm acting as a representative for Captain Byrd, Sector San Francisco today. I'm personally in the Waterways Safety Shop at Sector San Francisco.
Lieutenant, thank you very much for your participation.
You're welcome.
You are. Linda Fortis.
Good morning. I'm here with Catherine. I also am working BCDC planning on the Seaport Plan update.
Very good. Thank you very much. I have El Quadra.
No.
El Quadra, anybody there? Okay. Mike Jacob. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure, if you'd like to, Stas. Mike Jacob with Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, and we represent ocean carriers and marine terminal operators on the U.S. West Coast, including Oakland, and I look forward to doing a little bit more talking and briefing with you shortly.
Thank you very much, Mike. We have here the distinguished Michael Zampa, spokesman for the Port of Oakland. Michael.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Mike Zampa, I'm the PR guy for the port. I'm here only because I wanted to congratulate Mike Jacob on getting a daughter graduated from high school, so good for you. And I also want to thank all the customers on the call, Andy, Scott, Evie, Susan, and all the partners, Lieutenant Cotton, Susan Duran. You guys all do great work for the port. And PMSA, we've got a good relationship with those people. We've worked with John and Mike and John for a lot of years. More. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. We have Ron Brown.
Good morning, everyone. I've blanked out my picture because I haven't shaved in about 3 weeks, so I didn't want to scare anybody. Ron Brown with the Port of Oakland. Actually, I think I'm the longest standing member of the Propeller Club on this thing this morning. So I've been on the Propeller Club for about 12 years. So good morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to Mike's comments this morning.
Thank you very much, Ron. Susan Duran, did we get you?
No, you didn't. Sorry, here I am. Susan Duran, Flexivan, chassis provider in the Port of Oakland. We have probably about 80% of the business. So happy to hear what's going on and participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Dennis Deisinger.
Hi, Dennis Deisinger with BAE System Ship Repair out of San Diego, but I'm domiciled up here in the Bay Area and like to keep my fingers in the pies to see what's going on. Stas, thanks for setting us up. Also a board of director member for the San Francisco Marine Exchange.
Thank you. Dennis, it's good to see you. Is there anybody that I didn't get? We got everybody. Okay. I am, oh, Aaron Golbus. Aaron?
I'm here. Thank you, Stas. Aaron Golbus, Silverado Contractors, Sacker Marine Demolition. I'm glad I get to still participate with the Propeller Club. I was looking forward to great networking opportunities. It's a little funny on the video, but participate in these conversations.
Where are you?
I am in my warehouse at Pier 96.
Oh, very good.
But, I dream about being on trails.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, folks, thank you all for your introductions. I want to say one word on behalf of the Propeller Club, which, I'm Susan Sullivan. I see you up there. I know I didn't introduce you. Susan, say hello.
Hi, I'm Susan Sullivan. I work for Pasha Hawaii, the Pasha Group, and I manage their over high and wide and project cargoes, and I'm a board member for the Propeller Club.
Very good. Thank you, Susan. Okay, so I think that's got everybody, and we're going to, we have one other participant, Todd. Ellen, are you there? Ellen Jonk?
Just came in.
Hold on a second. Let's see if we can get Ellen, and then we'll get going.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, can you introduce yourself?
I got delayed. Sorry.
That's okay. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ellen Jonk. I'm an environmental consultant for all the folks that are doing a great job getting the boats and the docks together and environmental gold stars.
Very good. Ellen, thank you very much. Okay. The Propeller Club of Northern California does always welcome memberships. And this is a tough time for everybody, and we have been doing this kind of out of our budget, but it would be helpful if we got some help. And as I was saying to Mike before we got started, our IT technician, Todd Crawshaw, would really like to get a Tesla Model S, but we don't pay him enough money right now, but at least if we could continue to pay him something for his work, he would appreciate it. So I'm going to send out memberships links to everybody afterwards, and we would appreciate your support. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mike Jacob from PMSA. And Mike has been the point man for the effort opposing the ballpark at Howard Terminal. And we are in a situation right now where there's a lot going on and there's a great deal of uncertainty. I want to mention one thing that when I was at the hearing, the BCDC hearing a couple of weeks ago, Danny Wan, the executive director of the Port of Oakland, made two really interesting and I think important points. The first point is it is difficult, if not impossible, to make projections about the future. And we are in a very, very blind alley right now. The second point he made is that space at the Port of Oakland and at other ports with waterfront access is an important national security and emergency services asset. And in his testimony, Mr. Wan pointed out the Crown Princess situation, which would not have been possible if the port did not have available land and available berth space for these types of emergencies. And these situations don't happen often, but when they do, they can be life and death matters. So it's really important that our ports have the ability to access the water when they need to, because you never know when an earthquake or other emergency or climate issue is going to happen, and we're going to need that space. So without ado, I'm going to say just a couple of words. First of all, Mike came and presented to the Propeller Club in January. He has been an outstanding explainer of a very complicated situation with a lot of moving parts. And we were on the conference yesterday, and Mike is going to try and make this as simple and as clear as possible. Michael is the General Counsel and Vice President for the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, and he advises PMSA on legal, statutory, regulatory matters, and regularly testifies on behalf of the industry at administrative and legislative hearings. He is really the person that we go to when we try to understand what's going on. And without further ado, Mike, welcome to the Propeller Club, and thank you for your good work on the Howard Terminal issue.
Thank you, Stas, and appreciate being here today and having so many of our partners and friends on the call from the industry and from the port. Appreciate it. You know, the challenges I think we're all facing are really just daunting and unprecedented. So taking time out of your day to deal with this issue and getting an update on where we are, I think speaks to the concern that many of us have with this project moving forward. Stas, thank you for your coverage of that BCDC meeting, and we really appreciated the comments of Executive Director Danny Wan too, and couldn't agree more about the uncertainty in the world today and deciding what we do. So we really appreciate the invitation. As Stas mentioned, we obviously all have positions and feelings on this project, but kind of putting those aside, he asked for me to give an update about where we were, what's happening, and what's the latest and greatest. So I'm gonna pop up a little proposal while I'm talking, and we can walk through this together. The project itself has not changed much since you have all seen it, and so folks are familiar again with what we're looking at. The scope of the project is still basically 3,000 residential units, 1.5 million square feet of retail space, a hotel, an entertainment venue, and a 35,000 seat stadium at Howard Terminal. And most of you are obviously familiar with it, but it's right between our turning basin, our rail yard, the southeastern end of our terminal complex on the inner harbor, including Schnitzer Steel, and it's a critical juncture for what we do right now, and it's used for various different components of our supply chain, including truck and storage and parking, and for the time being, cruise ship berthing, although we hope that does not occur for much longer. It's certainly a daunting task. So to what Stas asked me to give a quick overview on, there's a lot of hurdles that remain outstanding before this project moves forward, and I just listed them out here in terms of what really needs to happen if this project is going to occur. First, there needs to be a publication of a draft environmental impact report. After that publication, then obviously you go through that entire process evaluating the EIR, and that is being handled by the City of Oakland. Once it's published, then they have to take comments. They would have to assess whether or not the EIR is adequate And then the city council would have to be voting on a final EIR. That's a process that typically takes several months in terms of just collecting comments and then responding to those comments in a final EIR. The city and the port have both outlined that they will not be moving forward in any aspect of a plan approval without having significant community benefits agreed to in a formal CBA, community benefits agreement. That process is outstanding and is underway. The city and the A's and the port are co-hosting that CBA process right now with several different community groups. But its initial timeline was they wanted to have a draft done by the end of May. It's now June 1st, and it's not very close to a draft. The Seaport Compatibility Measure process is also something that the port put into place when they extended their exclusive negotiating agreement last April. And when they did that, they acknowledged that the concerns that the maritime industry had expressed, and again, thank you to everyone on this call who's been active, that Stas mentioned earlier as actively pushing on seaport compatibility issues. They acknowledged that they needed to ensure that the primary business of the port was made whole. The way to do that, as contemplated by the Board of Port Commissioners at that time, was to put together the Seaport Compatibility Measure process. We've had some exploratory and initial conversations about that with the port staff, most notably in a summit last fall. But frankly, that also has been caught up in the delay of the release of the draft environmental impact report. And speaking with port staff recently, they said they're going to be reviewing and taking a look at that timetable to see if maybe this process shouldn't be moved forward independent of the EIR process, which we encouraged. As you heard from Linda and Catherine on the call from BCDC, they are still in the process of doing a Seaport Plan designation review and amendment to the Seaport Plan. And as part of that conversation, there is a very specific item with respect to the potential for removing the Seaport priority planning designation for Howard Terminal. That conversation needs to be resolved before any Howard Terminal actions can be taken. There's a Department of Toxics and Substance Control site review and cleanup that needs to be at least scoped and provided for. That cleanup doesn't necessarily have to be done, from what I understand, before there is any action taken on the site, but there needs to be a remediation plan and cleanup plan in place before there can be any entitlement work on Howard Terminal. The A's have said multiple times, and we take them at their word, that they cannot do the mitigation necessary for this project unless they have a tax increment financing agreement with the city of Oakland, where the city is actually financing a good portion of the infrastructure associated with the project. So while we are talking about a privately financed stadium, think of all of the additional infrastructure work that needs to be done with the transportation and logistics to get people to and from the stadium, to avoid interactions with the train, including grade separations, things like that. All those things are infrastructure developments that would need tax increment financing, according to the conversation with the A's in the legislature. That would have to be agreed to by the city. There needs to be a, I'm sorry, this is one out of order. The State Lands Commission needs to do a trust consistency determination as well. So after all that happens, you need to look at the project and say, you know, this is actually going to be consistent with state law, which governs the control of waterfront properties under the Tidelands Trust, and that is essentially the legal doctrine which requires waterfront uses to be primarily for waterfront properties to be primarily for waterfront uses. After all that, then the Port of Oakland can enter into an actual deal through leasing and sale of that property to provide an entitlement for the stadium. And so the short answer is that we are still at the front end of a lot of process. The draft environmental impact report is the key off of which all of these other processes will take their cues. It is the primary document which sets the timeline for all these other processes, and it has not been released. One of the reasons, the primary reason why it hasn't been released, as far as we have been told by the city, is that it has not yet received its streamlined review status, and this is now the subject of litigation that we're involved in. And so go ahead and outline this a little bit so you guys understand where we are and where the project is in relation to CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, and that's the state law that requires the development of an environmental impact report. Under CEQA, there was a streamlined review status that was put into place for certain large projects back in 2000 and, oh boy, I'm blanking on the date, 2011, I believe. AB 900 was passed to set up a streamlining process, which essentially says that once your EIR is complete, the review of any challenges in court needs to be completed within 270 days. That was called AB 900. There's several guidelines that were set up with respect to that process. Several years ago, the legislature created a process for CEQA streamlining review for the Howard Terminal under another bill called AB 734. And it's predicated on the application of the guidelines under AB 900. AB 900 authority sunset. It ceased being effective on December 31st of 2019. The A's submitted an application for Howard Terminal under the AB 900 guidelines in early 2019. One of the conditions that were added to that project in particular to make it eligible for AB 900 under AB 734 was that it has to demonstrate that it'll be net GHG neutral at the end of the project. So it cannot increase greenhouse gases. And 50% of the greenhouse gases that were developed or that resulted from the project needed to be mitigated on site. And the other 50% could be bought through credit trading, like cap and trade and things like that. By the end of the year, the A's still had not earned an approval from the State Air Resources Board that it had actually demonstrated net GHG neutrality. Subsequently, though, after January 1st, 2020, even though the guidelines extend, the A's continue to push for CEQA streamlining review eligibility findings from the governor. And ultimately, the state asked for public comment in March. And in response to those comments, PMSA, the California Trucking Association, the Harbor Trucking Association, Sinister Steel brought suit in reply to the request for public comment to ask a court whether or not this project is still eligible for CEQA streamlining. Even though those guidelines all sunset at the end of 2019. That suit was accepted by the court, but as you would guess, the court is a little bit in disarray with respect to its calendar. Right now, the courts only reopened last week. And then unfortunately, due to the events of the day, they've been closed the last couple of days as well. But we have essentially worked with the city and the state and the A's to make sure that we're still moving forward on this litigation, and we're expecting replies from them later this month under a stipulated agreement for a calendar. So the other obvious thing that's come up since we've last discussed this is COVID-19, and I think it's probably worth saying that we all have had a lot of impacts to our businesses, and we all know what pain feels like from an economic perspective, and that the baseball world is feeling the same type of pain, and we obviously don't relish that, but it is an important consideration with respect to the feasibility of the project. And so what's happened over the last several weeks is that it seems that has changed the landscape of a lot of the narrative in the press about this project. You might have heard that the A's in April
Todd? We've
Yeah, we lost Mike.
okay. Mike, we have lost you temporarily. Let's see if we can have any suggestions how we get him back.
No, let me see.
Maybe he can log off and log back on.
I'm sorry?
Maybe he can log off and log back in.
Nudge.
That's a good idea. All right. Let's
send him a text.
Okay. Let me do that. I don't have his number. Okay.
I got it.
You got it?
I do.
Okay. Would you text him?
Uh-huh.
Thanks. So while we're waiting, we can.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. So we were just, we had the baseball, you were talking about the baseball correspondence.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm going to blame the internet infrastructure in Lake County for that. I apologize. Yeah, so the city and the county are negotiating with the A's for rights to the Coliseum, and the rent consideration, I think, is important. I mean, think about it, if you're a landlord and you have a tenant that you're negotiating with, they're a current renter, they'd like to buy your property. In the middle of your negotiations, they say, you know what, I can't afford to pay rent. That'd be alarming enough. At that point in time, would you turn around and tell them, I've got this much more expensive location up the street with really complicated financing I'd like to talk to you about? And the answer to that is obviously not. And so the issue with respect to project feasibility for the A's at Howard Terminal is I think become obvious. So to the sporting press that's been following this, the columnists that are looking at the situation here in the Mercury News, I think you see this first quote, Howard Terminal, always a pipe dream, might as well be declared dead. The Chronicle says it's a body blow delivered to Howard Terminal, and the best option appears to be building a new ballpark at the Coliseum. Sports Illustrated last week basically said the same thing, including a quote from an insider at the organization. I wonder at what point they'll decide it's much easier to get a new stadium built on the current site. Howard Terminal is going to be tough before the pandemic. Now I just don't know. And that probably means a Coliseum location. And then several other columnists, again, pointing to how the Coliseum would be cheaper and easier to redevelop. And so I think for us that confirms what we've been saying this whole time, is that we think that the city of Oakland can have its cake and eat it too. It can have a thriving port, and it can have a reinvigorated and new investment in its baseball team. And they can do them side by side, and they can live together. The best place to do that is with the A's rebuilding its infrastructure around the new stadium in the Coliseum, and then redeveloping from there. And then one of the other things that's an update since last we talked in February, we did a poll with the East Oakland Stadium Alliance, and again, thanks to all of our partners that helped finance the poll. We asked voters the same question. Whether you would prefer a Coliseum location for a stadium or Howard Terminal. And before we did any pitches or any of the messages or anything else, the numbers were pretty stark, that most Oaklanders, 62% preferred Coliseum for the location over Howard Terminal. And if you asked fans, people who actually went to the games, it was even higher. They preferred the Coliseum location over Howard Terminal, 70% to 26%. And I don't think that's a surprise, because it really addresses the same issues that we're looking at from the transportation side as a hindrance and a business issue. I think from the fan, they're looking at those things from a fan experience issue. More congestion, harder to get to, lack of transportation alternatives, and higher prices are not what current fans want to see in that location. But again, this is pre-COVID, and before this, the sporting press had remarked that the impacts of the crisis had really crippled the ability of the A's to put together what they want. But we still think that the city can have both a working port and an investment. If the A's would focus on the Coliseum, we think that's the right thing for them to do too. But I think, Stas, those are really the next steps. If you're looking at what comes next, it really is, how do we make sure that when the draft EIR is released, that we're all ready and we're looking at it, whether it's in the context of a streamlined review or not, post-litigation. And we'll keep working with folks like BCDC and the port on seaport compatibility measures in the process to make sure that we have as many protections for maritime operations in the meantime as we can.
Very good. Thank you very much, Michael. I'm going to open this up to questions. So what you can do, one of two things. You can raise your hand through that chat function, or we can unmute and have people just come out. But Mike, the EIR, why has that been so delayed in showing up? That was supposed to originally have been out in February, right?
Well, take a step back. Originally, the schedule was for a EIR to be done last August, so about 10 months ago, and then it got pushed back several times. The main issue for this is, for everyone who's done projects in California, is that environmental review is really hard. It's intended to be hard. It is intended to be thorough. And it is intended to make sure that as a project development moves forward, that people with issues bring them forward enforce an entity that's going to be granting entitlements. In this case, it's the city and the port, and a myriad of other responsible agencies that you saw,
Right.
have all the information at their fingertips to make decisions and to mitigate impacts. That usually takes a long time. And that's for projects where you don't have entitlement issues, you don't have a lot of moving parts. When we're looking at doing a redevelopment of a marine terminal at the port, the EIR process is usually a multi-year process. And that's for taking a piece of property that's a marine terminal, that's planned to be a marine terminal, that's an existing marine terminal, and redeveloping it as a marine terminal.
Gotcha.
This is taking that and developing it from a marine terminal into a hotel and into a stadium and into 3,000 units of housing and to an office complex. So if you take the project itself, it's complex, but as you can imagine, all of the other components that are associated with it, including the transportation, all need to be included in that evaluation, and that takes a lot of time. And then obviously all the issues we've been bringing up as an industry and as a coalition of folks with concerns, force the A's to deal with a lot of additional issues and questions, and that's a good thing. That's what the process is for. And then finally, the final release date of February was held up, from what we understand from the city, by the lack of findings by the state for streamlining. Those findings need to be made before you publish your EIR. And so now, because it's after the end of the year, it will likely be a matter of time before we get a schedule from the court for this question of whether or not the EIR process is going to move on a streamlined basis or a non-streamlined basis, but it probably won't be released until after that question's been answered.
Very good. We have a question from Scott Taylor. Scott, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Scott, you're not unmuted yet.
There we go. How's
Scott.
that?
Yeah.
Mike, great presentation. Thank you very much. I hate to put you on the spot, but one of the things I think we should look at down the road here is this tax incremental financing. It'd be very interesting to find out. I've heard the number of $200 million it would cost, which probably means $400 million, as these things go. And it'd be interesting to find out how much that would cost per household in Oakland. I just can't imagine the taxpayers supporting that kind of number with all the challenges that Oakland has. And the second question I have is that as part of the Seaport compatibility study, I've asked this question at least 10 times and nobody can answer it. But there's 325,000 moves a year right now on Howard Terminal. And I'm just wondering where all those go if Howard Terminal is eliminated for truck parking and storage. It's taken us 10 years to take all the trucks off the streets in Oakland. And Howard Terminal is the answer for doing that. So thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Scott. Well, I think the second one first. Obviously, you know the answer to that just as well as we do. That there is no answer, and the A's have essentially said that that's not their problem; it's the port's problem, which is, I think, pretty patently unfair. And our partners at the port have been, really working hard to try to make something work there, and we appreciate that. But you're right. I mean, until we get back to the Seaport compatibility measure process and start drilling down, we won't get an answer to that question. So that is a big outstanding issue. But I think, turning to the tax increment financing, let's just be really honest about it. The way that works is essentially what the city is doing is saying, as you develop new property taxes increase with value. That delta, that additional increment, of tax is what they're financing against. If you just take a look at the total project in the context of what's happening now, property taxes are not going to be increasing. Property tax values are going to be decreasing steadily, just like they do after every recession or economic downturn. Property tax values decline. So the increment, the delta on the development, no matter how you slice it, is going to be smaller. They will not be able to generate the same amount of revenue that they could have pre-COVID crisis and pre-economic impact than they can after. And that's just the fact. So Scott, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think it's realistic to expect the city to be able to raise the type of revenue that they're talking about just off of this project alone. And we don't know what the numbers look like. But if they are still talking about 200 million, which is the number that has been used for several years, it was used with the Raiders at the Coliseum, and it has been a conversation out there too with respect to this project. I just don't know how you get there. I mean, it's basically the city's share of the property tax increases based on the increment. So it's a delta on a delta on a delta of a shrinking pie. So it's hard to see where they get there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ron Brown, you have a question. Do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask. I actually did post it for everyone, so you probably already see it. But I was going to ask Mike if he was aware of any other commercial projects that are proposed at other West Coast ports, because it seems like Howard Terminal would, if it goes through, would set a precedent, and other commercial developers will be licking their chops to go after maritime type properties. So are you aware of any other commercial projects being proposed on any of the other ports on the West Coast?
Yeah, Ron, that's a great question. Yes, but there are already places that have already been converted. So the biggest one right now is at the Port of LA. So on the San Pedro side of the harbor, well, I don't know. I guess I should have made that comment. Pre-COVID, they were planning on doing this. I don't know where that stands right now with respect to development. But that was on the San Pedro side of the harbor. It wasn't on the Terminal Island side. And it did raise a lot of issues because the concept from the city of LA was not that different from the concept here. Obviously, it wasn't stadium based, but it did involve a fair amount of relocation of dense housing to the waterfront. And so the concern was the introduction of several thousand units of high dense housing right on the working waterfront in San Pedro. And that is a little bit different, but it's, the commercial real estate pressure is there. I know you guys know it very well, and the port's done a very elegant job of integrating new housing developments into the waterfront in ways which were compatible with our operations in the past. And we thank you for that, including Oak to Ninth and things like that. But I would guess that we are not in a place where we're going to see an overwhelming demand for new commercial real estate development anytime soon. So I guess I can't say whether or not it would set a precedent because we just haven't seen that outside of LA. And I will say this, on the flip side, the ports that are relying on significant commercial real estate income right now in California are hurting really bad. So Anita from Port of San Francisco, I know you guys are feeling the pressure on the revenue side due to lack of tourism and transportation, entertainment. Port of San Diego has it in spades too, because they have the same type of a waterfront experience, they're also hosting a convention center. The convention center is on port property in Port of San Diego. So they've lost their cruise ship business, their tourism business, their hotel business, and their convention center business. There's not a lot of appetite in that world for new commercial real estate ventures right now.
Very good, thank you. Susan Ransom, you had a comment? Susan?
Can you hear me now?
Can.
I know everybody on this call knows the concerns that SSA has. Obviously, there will be a huge impact to our business if this moves forward. But kind of to couple with Mike on the comment about the A's missing their rent payment. I'm not sure everyone's aware, but they also furloughed a lot of their players. And in addition to that, they cut the salaries on the remainder of them. So the concern to me is, as we move forward into this, you know, it seems the way that the A's projected is that they've got deep pockets and that, you know, the never-ending money flow, right? So business is down. I'm a resident of Oakland as well. It's going to take a very long time for all of us to recoup from this. So the concern is that we keep moving forward, the maritime property gets transferred, and then the Oakland A's go out, you know, whatever, go out of business, can't afford it. And, you know, so it's very concerning right now that this is still being discussed at this stage of the world, basically. That's my comment.
Michael?
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, there's just a lot of variables. It's a complex project, it's hard to see a place where they're threading a needle with a lot of specificity right now.
Okay. Andy Garcia, you have a question.
Yes. My question evolves around two different organizations. One is the BCDC, and I'd like to know, Mike, how important is the BCDC's decision to allocate the Howard Terminal as a potential site for what the A's are proposing? And if they deny, if they refuse to accept that project, what happens? And then my second question is the lawsuit that the CTA, the HTA, the PMSA file against the state of California for going over the December 31st, 2019 deadline, if that is ruled on our favor, what are the implications of that type of ruling?
Yeah, well, those are both great questions, Andy. And so to take the first one first with respect to BCDC, every single one of the agencies that has discretion over planning and approval is critical for the project to move forward. So if BCDC doesn't change the planning, there's no project. If State Lands Commission doesn't do doesn't make a ruling that it's consistent with the Tidelands Trust consistency, there's no project. If the Port of Oakland does not enter into a sale or lease agreement, obviously there's no project. If the City of Oakland can't process the EIR, there's no project. So every single one of those places are in DTSC. If they don't release the existing covenants on the location right now because it's polluted with respect to a cleanup plan, there's no project. So each one of those is critical for overall project approval. But you're right in highlighting BCDC, because as the direct planning body with respect to the designation of that site, it doesn't matter how good the EIR is, you can't put housing on that site if it's still designated for seaport priority planning. State Lands Commission won't even look at a consistency determination because it still has to be seaport priority planning. So it takes a lot of significance because it's the first one, and it's one of the most important after the EIR. So that is critical. But again, it's the same as a level of criticality as all the other discretionary approvals that are needed everywhere else. But it certainly is important. With respect to the lawsuit specifically about what happens. So there's going to be an EIR on this project either way. The question is, what rules apply to the EIR upon its release and then after it's potentially approved by the city? So if there is no CEQA streamlining and it doesn't apply, then all the normal rules for the EIR apply. And those rules include when you publish it, how many days the public has to respond, how many forum the city has to have as the lead agency, and then what happens if the EIR is litigated and how long it takes to move through that process are all the same rules that apply under a current EIR. If the streamlining does go into effect, there are certain other provisions that have to occur. So if the lawsuit is resolved in the favor of the A's in the city, then what we would expect is they would publish the EIR. It would then have a set of new hearings. So as part of this requirement for streamlining, there are preliminary public hearings that have to occur that don't happen in a normal review as part of the streamlining. And then most of the other criteria are post-adoption. So if the city goes ahead and agrees to the EIR and there's litigation, then the streamlining is all in the back end. And essentially what happens is all of those reviews have to be completed and wrapped up by California courts within 270 days. So if you include all of the other machinations, basically what it does is it sets a rule that from time of challenge to time of completion of challenge, all of that has to happen within a year after the final action.
Okay. Ellen, you got this. We're going to do one last question and then we're going to wrap up. Ellen, would you ask your question, please? Ellen, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay. Well, Andy, thank you for bringing up the, putting up front the BCDC question and also the lawsuit. Those are both really good. In 1982, I had a colleague, his name was Frank Berger. He was a former district engineer of the Army Corps of Engineers. And he formed a group called the Golden Gate Ports Association. And that morphed into an organization called Bay Planning Coalition, which I founded to succeed Golden Gate Ports to pretty much keep the ports intact. So the Seaport Plan was a really key piece of my effort early during the 80s and all the transactions and amendments that have been since then. But the whole idea was to protect the ports. So BCDC is very important here. And I'm wondering, I want to hear from Mike and the others, is the coalition active? Because I have to say, I congratulated Andy and Susan and Robert Estrada, IBU, at the last Seaport, at the last briefing at BCDC. You did a fabulous job. It was the first time that I had seen that kind of comment about the need for continuing the land, that we can't lose that land. And BCDC really woke up on that, at that hearing. There's another hearing on Thursday, a briefing. And just here again, I want to encourage all those that were testifying before to keep up the heat on BCDC and the information. That's what they need about what the value of the operations and the value of the waterfront land, to stay that way.
Very good. Thank you very much. Michael?
Well, it's hard to say it better than Ellen just did. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, we're going to keep continuing to participate in the process. The complex questions that BCDC has to answer across all of its planning areas with respect to what does the future look like for the Bay are even more complex in the commercial sphere with respect to the ports. But, you know, as we all know, our investments are, you know, multi-decade. They are very large. They're capital intensive. and they require a fair amount of long lead time and planning. So to Ellen's point, if you're going to plan for that type of infrastructure to be effective and really what it's supposed to be, which is providing long-term services and benefits to the state of California for decades to come, your planning criteria need to be reflective of a lot of flexibility with respect to how do I facilitate the level of investment necessary to sustain that infrastructure. That requires a lot of information participation.
Michael, we have a question. What time is a BCDC meeting on June 4th?
I think it's at 1 p.m.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. The agenda, of course, is on the BCDC website. I can send that around, but there's, as far as I know, if Linda's still on the phone, she could clarify, but the information.
Yes. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Ellen. This is Linda. Yes, the meeting starts at 1. We anticipate the briefing to begin closer to 2. And it'll be, the meeting is Zoomed, so you go to our website and the link is there. You're welcome to listen to the entire meeting. You can join at any time. Maybe 1:45 would be your latest log on time, just to be safe, you know, that you'll be there for the briefing.
Yeah, and Linda, you're still collecting information, right? I mean, there's no, you haven't.
Oh no, it's just a brief. Catherine is going to brief the commission on basically what has happened at the you know, what happened at the May 11th meeting and where we are. This is not a public hearing. It's not a vote. We still have to work through the Seaport Committee for at least a couple more meetings as we gather even more information, including an environmental assessment before we go to the commission.
Okay, but you are taking public comment. Sure.
Absolutely, anytime. Yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, so folks, I really appreciate the comments. And Michael, if you could make your PowerPoint available, I'll distribute that to all of the participants. We also have a recording that will be up on the PCNC site in about 24 hours, Todd?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Probably this afternoon.
Okay, very good. So that information will be available. We'll get that to you as soon as possible. We have the hearing on the 4th. Linda's pointed out that our interest should be coming in at about 1:45. And with that, I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to point out that our next presentation is on June the 16th. And thanks to Susan Ransom, we're having a presentation from ZPMC, which is the Chinese container crane builder. And they are going to do a presentation on their container crane technology and also on their harbor automation system. So for those of you who still believe that we need a port and we need an active Port of Oakland with state-of-the-art technology, this will be a very interesting meeting, and I look forward to your participation. And I hope that we will see many of you at that time. I want to thank you all very much. Michael, excellent presentation. Thank you very much for your good work and your continued good work. I want to thank our harbor trucking friends for all of the good work they do. I did not mention the ILWU. Local 10 has been an outstanding supporter, and we have put a very good coalition of labor and management together on this one. So thank you, Local 10, if anybody's here on that one. Thank you all again very much for all of the work that you're doing at the port, and we hope to see you soon and hopefully on the 16th. Be well and be safe. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, guys.